Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf talks about how lots were drawn in the Beis Hamikdash between the Kohanim to decide which ones would get the right to do the avoda of the day, beginning with the Chumas Hadeshen and several other avodos and the Karban Tamid. So the Daf begins with the Machlokas of Nachman and of Sheshes as to what clothing they were wearing. The Gemara brings a couple of proofs to each side. Then we get to a Mishnah, and the Mishnah tells us about what the avodas were that were in the lottery. It talks about the first lottery and the second lottery, and it also discusses the order in which the parts of the Karban Tamid were brought onto the Mizbeach. The Gemara will have a machlokas between several Tanoim as to what the order of the parts were. So the Gemara begins. We're going to start on the last few lines in Daf Chaf Dalid. Which clothing were the Kohanim wearing when they drew lots to see who was going to be the one who got to do the first avodah of the day, the Chumas Hadeshen? So says Rav Nachman, it has to be that they were wearing their non-Beis Hamikdash clothing. They're wearing their regular clothing. It had to be because if they're wearing Big Day Kodesh, says Rav Nachman, then the one who lost might just grab the opportunity for himself. He might just run up the ramp and decide to grab the opportunity, even though he didn't win. Says Rav Sheshes, however, it has to be that they're wearing Big Day Kodesh, because out of the great excitement, the one who won might just run up the ramp and do it himself, and he's wearing the wrong clothing, so we have to make sure he's at least wearing the right clothing before we award the opportunity to do the first avodah to whoever it is. So now Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes each bring a proof to their own position. And they say this is their source. So Rav Nachman says, my source is from a Mishnah describing what happens after the lots were drawn. It says that the chazanim, who are the shamoshim, the people who worked there and helped out, they immediately took him, doesn't say who, it says that they took him, or them, they took them, and they changed their clothing. They took all their clothing off them, leaving on only the pants, and put on other clothing. So it says Rav Nachman, who are we referring to over here? Obviously we're referring to the one who won the lot, and it's his job to do it, and you see that he had to change. So obviously he was wearing non-Big Day Kodesh, he was wearing regular clothing, and they had to change him into Big Day Kodesh. Obviously at the time of the lottery, then he was wearing Big Day Chol. So it says Rav Sheshes, no, that would not be correct. Actually, the truth is that the ones that have to change their clothing are the ones who did not win the lottery. Everybody first changed into Big Day Kodesh, and the ones who lost had to change back into Big Day Chol. And I'll prove it to you, says Rav Sheshes. I'll prove it to you, because according to you that they're changing into Big Day Kodesh, how could they change everything and then leave on just the pants? Doesn't make sense. We have a halacha, we know that it says al basari, umechnasei vad yeh al basari. And from there we learn that the pants have to be the first Big Day Kodesh to go on. According to you, it's the last one. We leave on his weekday pants while we change everything else. So the Gemara says that's not a problem. Rav Nachman will say, no, the way I understand that is that they first changed his pants into Big Day Kodesh, and then leaving the Kodesh pants on, then they changed everything else. So this way they changed the pants under the main clothing so that he would not have to be fully undressed in any one shot. They first did the pants under his weekday clothing, and then they took off everything else and put on the other Big Day Kodesh. Okay. Now the Gemara goes to Rav Sheshes discussing his own source. Rav Sheshes' source is from a brisa discussing how the lots were drawn in the Lishkas Hagazis. So it says that the Lishkas Hagazis, this was a very large hall built on the second floor. It's where the Sanhedrin would sit. And the Lishkas Hagazis was arranged as follows. There would be an elder who sat on the western end, and the lots were drawn on the eastern end, and the elder was observing, and the Kohanim would stand around in a circle, and one person who was in charge would take off somebody's hat. One of the Kohanim would take off their mitznefes, the brisa says, and then when they picked a number, the count would start from the person whose mitznefes was taken off. So Gemara says, he took off his mitznefes, obviously they were wearing Big Day Kodesh. Mitznefes is one of the Big Day Kahuna. Simple. So Gemara says not necessarily. All the Kohanim, even when they weren't dressed in the Big Day Kahuna, the special clothing for the Beis Hamikdash, they still were wearing things that were similar to them, because their mothers would make them Big Day Kahuna type clothing. Out of their great pride for them, they would make them their own versions of Big Day Kahuna. Now that didn't count as real Big Day Kahuna. They couldn't use it for the avodah. They could use it for their own private avodas, for their own personal things that they were able to use it for. But real avodah of the Karban and Tamid, let's say, they couldn't use it for. But it wasn't mitznefes, it was a hat. So it could be that they were wearing those Big Day Chol, and they had a hat that could be taken off to start the process. Okay, now Abaye comments that based on this description in the Brisa here, we could learn that the Lishkas Agazis must have been partially in the space of the Azara and partially out of the Azara. It means that part of it was Kodesh and part of it was Chol, and that it had two doors, one which opened into the Azara and one which opened out of the Azara. How do you know that? Because there's a contradiction here. The Zaken, the old man, it says he was seated and watching. You're not allowed to sit in the Azara. Only the kings of Beis David are allowed to sit in the Azara. So he couldn't be sitting in the Azara. He has to be sitting in an area which was not Azara, which was Chol. On the other hand, the lots had to be drawn in the Azara, because we said on Daf Chav, the reason that they did so many lots is to create action in the Azara to fulfill the pasuk which says Beis Elokim Nahalach Berogesh. We want there to be excitement. So if it's not in the Azara, then it's not Beis Elokim. So you're not accomplishing it. So obviously these two events happened partially in Chol. The Zakin sat in Chol, not in the Azara. The lots happened in the Azara. Obviously the room was partially Chol and partially Kodesh, partially Azara and partially not. Now in order for that to work, it had to have two doors. Because if it only had one door, then it would have the halachic status of whichever part its door opened into. It doesn't matter where the room was located. If its door opened into the Azara, it would be considered all Azara. And if the door opened into the Chol area, it would be considered all Chol. So obviously it was partially, it straddled the line of the Azara. It stuck partially into the Azara and partially out of it. And it had doors into both, and that way it had split halacha. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses the second round of lotteries that were drawn for avodos in the Beis HaMikdash. The first round, as we had seen, was for the Trumas Hadeshen and the arranging of the parts and the logs in the fire. The second round is about the Karban Tamid and some other activities. So there are 4 avodas that are separate from the bringing of the parts of the Karban Tamid, and 9 avodos that are bringing of the parts of the Karban Tamid up the ramp to the Mizbeach. So we have 4 and 9 for a total of 13 activities that were assigned in this drawing of lots. So the first one, the Gemara says, is who shechts, who slaughters the Karban Tamid. The second one is who puts the blood on the Mizbeach. Third one is who cleans off the activity, the remnants of Ketores from the inner Mizbeach, the Mizbeach Hasav. Fourth one is who cleans off the menorah and who prepares the menorah for use. Now, the next 9 are who brings the various parts up onto the Mizbeach, and there were 9, it was brought in 9 parts, and it's as follows. The Brisa says, one Kohen brought the head and the right leg, another Kohen brought the tail and the left leg, another Kohen brought the stomach. Then you had one that brought the neck together with the parts, the organs, the internal organs that included the liver, the esophagus, the heart, and the other parts connected. The 5th Kohen in this group brought the 2 side walls, the 2 ribs. The 6th one brought the other internal organs, the intestines. The 7th one brought the flour, the Karban Mincha, the Isaron, that went together with, not Karban Mincha, the Nesachim, that went together with the Karban Talmud. Another Kohen brought the Minchas Chavitin, that's a special Kohen Mincha brought by the Kohen Gadol, that went together with the Karban Talmud. And the last, the 9th one, brought the wine, the Nisuch of 3 lugan of wine, that went on the Mizbeach. Okay, so these were the 9 avodas that went up together. Now, the Mishnah says, adding on, that Ben Azai said in front of Rabbi Akiva, they were Rabbi Yeshua, that the order in which they were brought was the order in which the animal walks. That is not the same as the order that was listed by the Tanna Kama, but he's saying that the order was the order in which the animal walks. The Gemara will discuss what exactly the order of bringing of the parts were. So the Gemara now begins, and the Gemara has a few questions about how the lotteries were drawn. The Gemara first of all says, did they draw one lottery, and the winner did the first job, and everybody to his right, the next 12 people standing to his right, got the next jobs? Or did they draw 13 separate lots? So the Gemara says, okay, let's try to bring a couple of proofs to this question. First of all, we said in a brisa that there were 4 lotteries drawn. According to you, there's already 13 in the first one, then it's a lot more than 4. So obviously there was just one lot drawn, and everybody to the right of the one who won the lottery also got a job. So Gemara says, not necessarily. It could just mean that there were 14 ceremonies of drawing lots. They would gather everyone together. There were 4 ceremonies of drawing lots. They would gather everyone together 4 times to draw lots. But within each one, you could have multiple lots that were actually drawn. And in this one, there were 13. So that's not necessarily a proof either way. Okay, the Gemara says, now let's bring another proof. This proof says that as far as the bringing of the ketores, which is not listed here, but the bringing of the ketores, the Kohen who won that lottery would turn to the Kohen to his right and say, you're going to help me. He's going to bring the ketores, the actual spices, and the second Kohen, the one to his right, will bring a shovelful of coals from the special fire on the outer Mizbeach and bring them to the inner Mizbeach so that he can burn the ketores on that. So the Gemara has 2 ways to establish this proof. This could prove either way. This could either prove that you see clearly that the guy to the right got the next jobs, or you see from here that only by ketores did he get the next job. But in the other ones, the other avodos, you would have to do a separate lottery. So the Gemara is not really a proof either way. The Gemara first tries to say that you see that this is what happened by all of them. The Gemara says not necessarily. It could just be that it was special by the ketores that the person to his right was part of the winner's victory. The reason for that is that the bringing of the shovel and the bringing of the ketores, the bringing of the shovel full of coals and the bringing of the actual ketores is really one activity. That's doing the ketores on the inner Mizbeach required those 2 steps. It was really one thing. They worked together, and therefore it would be one lottery, and he would bring the person to his right with him. On the other hand, if you want to say that this only applies to ketores, and it clearly doesn't apply to anything else, I would say no. It could be that it applies everywhere, but I needed you to tell me that for the ketores, they did not do an extra special second raffle for the second half of it. Meaning, really, all the jobs, there was one raffle, there was one lottery drawn, and it was for 13 people, the one who won it, and the 12th to his right. You would have not assumed that was true by the ketores, that the 2 jobs included in ketores was given out the same way. And the reason is because we know that the ketores makes a person rich. And therefore, we would think they would make a special lottery, one for the one who brings the spices, and the other one for the one who brings the coals. Okay, the Gemara now has another proof to the question as to whether you have separate lotteries or one. The Gemara says, it's a brisa, it's Reb Chia says clearly, it says that for each particular job, they did not do a separate raffle. The Kohen who won and the 12 next to him, they all won with him, and so that clearly shows that that is the way that it worked. Okay, now the Gemara's next question is, we missed one avoda here. We did not list the person who did Kabbalah, the catching of the blood. That is an avoda, and it doesn't say that. It said that they did a lottery for the one who would shecht, and they did a lottery for the one who would put the blood on the Mizbeach. Who caught the blood? Obviously, it was not a separate person. But who was it? Was it the one who shechted, or was it the one who was putting the blood on the Mizbeach? So the Gemara tries a few proofs to this as well. The Gemara first brings a proof from a brisa that says that there was a Kohen Gadol by the name of Ben Katin, and he made that the kior should have 12 spouts, should have 12 faucets, so that all 12 Kohanim who needed to wash their hands for the first round of activities should all be able to wash at the same time. You shouldn't have to wait on line. So Gemara says, hold on a second, there's 12, but there are 13 activities. Why is 12 spouts enough? So, one thing's clear, the one who did shechita doesn't have to wash his hands. Shechita is kosher bizarre, a non-Kohen is allowed to do it, and therefore does not require washing of the hands before shechita. That's why there are 12 jobs. So the problem is that if the person who did shechita also did the Kabbalah, then he has to wash his hands for the Kabbalah. Obviously, then the person who did shechita didn't do anything else, and that's why he doesn't have to wash his hands, and that's why you only need 12 faucets. And the person who was doing the application, the zrika application of blood onto the mizbeach, he anyway has to wash his hands for that. He also did the Kabbalah, and that is why there's only 12. So Gemara says, not only that, we also have a brisa which seems to support this. The brisa says that the slaughterer is slaughtered, and the one who caught the blood, and then he went to put it on the mizbeach. Clearly shows that that's the same individual. Okay, next. We had seen that Ben Azai told Rabbi Akiva that the order in which the parts were brought up the ramp to the mizbeach is the order in which the animal walked. Says the Gemara, what order is that? So the Gemara says the head goes first, but the head always went together with the right leg. According to all opinions, the head went together with the right leg. So the head and the right leg go first. Afterwards, it's followed by the chest, then the neck and the stomach, then the two front legs, then the two side walls, then the tail and the left hind leg. Okay, that's how the animal walked. That's in the order of the animal's proceeding, starting with his front and ending at his back. Now the Gemara brings another opinion. The Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yaisi, it was not in that order. It was in the order in which the animal is skinned. And when you skin an animal, you hang it from a hook by its hind legs, and you skin it. And how is it skinned? So, first of all, the head and the hind leg first, of course. Then the tail, because you're skinning from the top down. The tail and the left leg, that's where you start. Then the two side walls as you skin down the walls, the two front legs, then the chest and the neck and all the organs that are attached to that. Third opinion here is Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says it was in the order in which you cut it off. After the skinning, the parts were cut off piece by piece, and they were each given to Kohanim piece by piece as they were cut off. What is that order? So first, of course, the head and the right leg, then the two front legs, then the chest, then the neck and all its parts, and then the two side walls, and finally the tail and the left leg was the last thing held left hanging on the hook after everything else was cut off, and that was given to the last Kohen on the line. Now Rabbi Yosef clearly says this is actually a fourth way. He says it was done in the order of its quality, in order of its value. What's the order of its value? Again, first the head and the right leg, then the chest, then the neck and its parts, then the two side walls, then the tail and the left leg, and finally the last and least valuable part is the two front legs, which didn't have much meat on it. So the Gemara has a kasha, a question amongst the Girsa here, whether this question is on Rabbi Yosi or it's on the Tana of our Mishnah, where the Gemara is about to say what he holds. But the question is that the pasuk seems to have a different order as to what value is. There's a pasuk in Yecheskel that says, gather all its parts, all the good parts, and then it says Yarich, first the leg, then Kasef, then the shoulder, which is the front leg, and then afterwards Mifchar Tzamim Mali. It's a different order than we said here. So it says no, that's different. Hayibik Chusha, that's talking about a very skinny animal where the flesh doesn't add much value. So therefore the order of the value is different than it's listed here. So now the Gemara asks, what's the difference between this order and the order, the Tana of our Mishnah? The Tana of our Mishnah gave a different order. So Gemara says, Rava explains that they're both hold that it should be in order of the value. Rabbi Yaisi Haglili considers value to be how much flesh it has on it, how much fat it has. The Tana said in order of size. The larger size, our Mishnah said that the larger size pieces go first. So the Gemara now asks, everybody here seems to agree though that the head goes first, and the head is together with the right leg. So the Gemara says, where do you get this from, that the head goes first? The Gemara says, well, because the pasuk says, when it describes the hakrava, it says, "V'nita chasel and sachav," cut up into pieces. First do the head and the poder. Poder is a sheet of fat which was inside the animal, and they took the sheet of fat out. And so it specifically mentions the head first, so you see that the head goes first. Now, why does the head be together with the right leg? So because the head has the least flesh on it, it's mostly bone, and the right leg has the most flesh on it compared to all the other parts. In order to counteract the bone, we wanted to have a lot of flesh, therefore we put the two on together. Gemara now says, hold on a second, but the pasuk describing the poder, there's a different pasuk that also singles out the poder. It singles out the head also. Rashi explains why that is singled out, but it singles out the poder. How do you understand that? The Gemara says that's to teach that the head and the neck, which was all bloody and disgusting, should be covered as you bring it up on the Mizbeach Derech Kavod. So they took this sheet of fat, they draped it over the head and its cut part, and that's how they brought it up.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.